Welcome back to another episode of the Strong Family Project podcast. I'm Joe, joined by Mel. Today we're going to be tackling what a lot of people accept as a generational truth, that kids are soft these days. And we're going to discuss if that's true, when it's not true, and what we can do to build more resiliency in our children.
Welcome back to the Strong Family Project podcast, where we guide you on the path to raising confident, independent, and resilient children in a strong family environment.
Before we get into today's topic, we did have a bit of a breakthrough with our family this past week. We went over to some friend's house, and it was a great time, and we were hanging out with our kids, and we tried to build relationships with them, and we did some extra playing sports with them. We took Logan to do 3D printing and do a lot of the stuff that he enjoys, and one of our kids asked me, hey, I like this girl. What should I do? And I think that's a big moment, because a lot of times I'm sarcastic. A lot of times I joke around, but I knew that was a serious moment. I didn't joke around at all. I wanted to give him some real advice so that he learned it was okay to come to those things. I'm not going to bust his chops about it. Like, that's a part of life that's critically important. If I bust his chops once, he may never come to me again. Because at that age, they joke about it with their friends, and they all do oh, you like someone, whatever that sitting in a tree thing is. How does it go? So sitting in a tree, Kiss. All right.
I can't think of it right now.
Kid stuff.
Oh, it's their name.
And so I want to, too late.
Wow, okay.
Opportunity's gone. You had your chance to nail it. And so we want to give them we want to contrast what they're experiencing with their friends. And so they came and asked for advice. Mel was there too, on what to do. And we talked about it, and we wanted to give some serious advice. And so I suggested, why don't you just hang out as a group, maybe go on a little hike, maybe do this or that, real age appropriate things. And I want to make sure that we teach them that it's not about, playing kissy face. It's about the communication skills and those butterflies you get in the stomach when the other person says something to you or acts a certain way towards you, and your ability to reciprocate and elevate that. It is not like a physical thing, especially at that age.
Right. It's really about being willing to spend time with someone.
And I should say, by that age, I'm sorry to cut you off.
Oh.
I want to make sure I'm age appropriate almost through high school. Like, we're not talking like it becomes appropriate for other things as you get closer to an older age. But I want to talk age appropriate as in, I take age appropriate and expand it a lot further than what most people think. Oh, they're in high school, they can go make out on the couch. No, knock that off. Like, why don't you learn how to talk first?
Yes, exactly. And then I think if you cross the line to like physical, it's harder to go back and just do the non-physical and learn how to communicate and just enjoy each other's company and get to know each other and just be silly and not get too serious. And I see your point with that. I want to go back to the point of them coming to us, though, because two things. One, we've really tried to set up the foundation so that when these things arise, they will come to us. So it's part of the whole point of the Strong Family Path, of all the different times during the day that we spend together, dinner time, evening debrief, even in the morning a little bit with our morning routine. We've set up all of that opportunity. Oh, the family meetings. We continuously do all those different things to allow them to see that they can come to us. A couple episodes ago, we talked about when the kids are adults, we want to have earned them wanting to come to us because they see us as people who have wisdom and we'll tell them what we think and really care about them. The other thing that I think made it easier for them to come to us was that it wasn't direct. We were in the car. So it wasn't like you were looking at each other and it was super intense. It was like a less intense situation. Like, for example, if you're going to have a conversation with your kid that's about something serious, it might be better to have it on a walk. Mm-hmm. And I think this is also true. I don't remember where I heard this, but with boys tend to communicate better when it's not like directly face to face, whereas women like to sit and look at each other when they talk. So just another little tip where if you're going to have these conversations, it doesn't have to be like this serious sit down necessarily. It can be in a more casual scenario.
And so I'd want to share that parenting win with you. I never went to my dad to ask him about relationship advice, but I do want to foster that with our kids. So that was cool to hear. Try to maximize it. Hopefully we can keep it going. And hopefully you're building those relationships that they come to you first and they're not looking to the internet. They're not looking to their friends. They're looking to you and your family values to help solve life's big questions for them.
I like that you also said there's a contrast between what their friends might do and then what we
When
might
I was that
say.
age, I would give them terrible advice to my friends.
Like the friends don't necessarily have good life experience yet.
No. And they're no childish about it. They want to egg you on because they're curious what's going to happen. And there's a lot more to the dynamic than rooting for your success.
You know what, too, though? I think part of why they might come to us is because they see how playful we are. We always hug each other almost on purpose in front of them, and I used to find it gross, right? But you knew that there was a little bit of they were still interested. And now I almost think they appreciate it more and I don't want to say they want exactly what we have, but I think they see that we have something special. So we're role modeling what a fun and strong relationship is.
I told them that, okay, I'm the guy that can help you get a good woman. I got one right here because you were sitting in the car. Got one. So they see it, they see the dynamics, and I think that helps out. It parlays into today's topic, which is the resiliency of children, the resiliency and overarching statements of saying this generation isn't as good as whatever. Every generation says that. We have to acknowledge that up front. There's going to be improvements generation. There's going to be things that fall between the cracks generation to generation. And so it's trying to take away those big overarching statements that paint someone in a certain category and then try to find what works for you and your family and don't fall into the trap of saying all the kids today are soft. All the kids don't want to work hard. Nobody wants to work this job, blah, 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 blah. Every generation said that about the generation before. So let's acknowledge it. That is a very limited way to view the world.
I was listening to a podcast, maybe this is what sparked this a little bit, and it was about how kids these days seem to be softer and parents don't want their kids to deal with any kind of adversity. And nobody says this anymore. Nobody tells their kid to just toughen up and handle it and you'll be okay. And I just thought to myself, I don't like that they said nobody, because we say that and we can't be the only ones that are trying to raise our kids in a way that helps them to learn resiliency, to become more independent. So that bothered me. It bothered me a lot because it didn't sit right with me. Like, it's not fair to just make those overarching statements.
So let's start with what is leading to those perceptions. What about society is making people say kids are soft these days? I'll start with one. We ping pong back and forth. I do think it's a lot about what the media covers and celebrates. There's not a lot of resiliency celebrated. Occasionally it's there though, if you look, for sure, that right now there's some world championships going on with running. People are telling stories about how they made it through and are winning these world championships now, if you look for it. It's not the main thing that's covered. Usually it's so-and-so got the short end of the stick. How should society make it right? Or whatever it is. Some version of that over and over again with different demographics, different groups, different people. And I don't think resiliency is celebrated as much as it was. Now we have to understand, as a U.S. history teacher, so there is a lot of propaganda around what is best for the country. And so when we look back at World War I, World War II, they had to celebrate resiliency because the government wanted people to go to war. And they're talking 18, 19-year-olds storming the beaches at Normandy and things like that. Like, they needed to say resilience. And then they started, and there's a lot of positive stuff that come out of this too. I'm not saying all propaganda is bad if it celebrates the good characteristics of human nature. There are positives too as well. All right, I started the government said, hey, we need to tell women that they can go work in the factories because we need factory workers. We took all the guys. We said, hey, you're really strong. Why don't you go to war? Now, what do we do on the war effort on the home front? And they started celebrating the strength of women. Rosie the Riveter and all that came out of that because that's what the government needed for a successful war effort. It wasn't really about let's teach men resiliency, let's teach women strength. It was like, hey, what do we need? Let's start there. So there's positives that can spin out of it. I'm absolutely not saying that there isn't value to both sides of that effort. But we have to identify that the stories that are being told to us are propaganda, and we need to filter it to decide what serves us and what doesn't serve us. Some of it is positive. Some of it is to benefit others. I'll give an example of benefiting others. A lot of the FDA stuff benefits the corporations that donate a lot of money to the FDA. This isn't conspiracy theory. You can look it up. You can start with the breakfast cereal studies. And the reason why I bring that one up, where they came out with like breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And study was paid for by the big breakfast companies and then pushed across the country. So last week, the CEO of Kellogg's came out and said, I know times are economically tough. What you should really do is eat cereal for dinner now because it's a cheaper alternative. And now, is that best for your health to have a bowl of sugar in the morning and a bowl of sugar in the evening? Probably not. I don't know your financial situation, but there's probably better choices even within that financial range. But we're being told a lot of stories, and we need to be intelligent enough to filter. Yes, it is tough. Yes, we should have a reasonable expectation that our news is telling us basically the truth, that the FDA, the government's basically in our best interest. But that hasn't been the case historically. It is absolutely factually proven to be the case historically. And so it's important for us to develop our own core values, our own family values, and decide what we believe and what we don't believe. So take the information for what it is, but be a little bit more intelligent about what you internalize.
It's really about teaching your kids critical thinking, not just believe everything they hear.
So where I was going with that, I apologize for that slightly off topic, but explaining that's what served the country for a long time. And now what tends to sell clicks, sell the eyeballs to get to look at marketing is telling stories of people who aren't as resilient or aren't as successful and how society is holding them down or whatever it is, or why they're getting the short end of the stick might be a better way of saying it. And so we see a lot of that. And that contributes very much to people becoming more like that. If you always celebrate when you're vulnerable, all right, this person, there's a balance to it. But if you're always celebrating vulnerability, more people will want to act like that so they get that attention. And so it's important to filter.
That it points to victim culture. People start to identify as what is the weakest part of them or what is wrong with them instead of celebrating or identifying with the things that are really positive. And that goes into what I was going to say. Another reason I think this is happening is because there's much more of a focus on the individual and not on others. So, for example, with kids, yes, our kids are more the center of our world than someone else's world. But it's really important that the kids don't think that they are the center of the world. They are a person who's part of a society and part of a community, and their needs are not always going to be the most important. And we really try to teach those kids that. So I think there is a mentality out there that the individual is so much more important and you have to take care of you and always talk about you. And the more you talk about yourself, the more almost selfish our society becomes. And then you become weaker because if you're only thinking about yourself, you're really not taking the time to pour into others and develop good relationships.
Can you give an example? Because I would like to counter that, but I want to make sure that I'm understanding what you're saying correctly.
Gosh, okay.
Let me bring up my question and
Yeah.
then maybe you can explain more. I think people don't focus on their individual skills and characteristics enough. They allow them to be individually weak and use it as an excuse. Like, I'm focused on the community. I'm wearing my t-shirt that stands for this thing. I'm doing this. I'm going to this little parade or this protest, but I can't make my own food. I can't do one push-up. I can't do tons of stuff in my life, but I'm focusing. I'm a good person on everybody else.
Okay, so I didn't mean it that way. So I'm glad you said that. So yes, we think that personal excellence and individual skills and critical thinking is utmost importance. What I'm saying is more the focus on, I think it goes back to more the victim thing, on feelings. And in the moment, you're not feeling right now, or somebody hurts your feelings, let's make a huge deal about that. Whereas maybe what it really should be, like someone said something mean to you, that happens, you need to move on and be strong and resilient. So I think what I was trying to say, maybe there's more of a focus on the individual, like your feelings right now are more important than anything else. I still don't think I'm being clear though.
I think there is a dichotomy there. So it's if Henry's playing basketball and we think he's the best basketball player ever, we don't want him to get his head up his rear thinking then maybe he's got to ride the pine a little bit. Maybe he's got to ride the bench. and work his way onto the team and contribute to the team so that he can earn the right for playing time and not just tell him you're the best and us go complain to the coach, you're the best, you're the smartest, you should get X grades. Like, why can't believe teachers are giving you bad grades, and making it all about the individual.
Yes, and I have listened to a couple podcasts where they bring up this idea of when you overpraise your kid, they start to think that they're amazing and perfect and everything. And then when they grow up, they're going to expect that the world sees them that way, that they're infallible, that they are entitled to everything. I think that's where I'm going with it is if you overpraise your kid and make them and always say how proud of them that you are and how perfect they are, I think it leads them to get too conceited. And then they will be too entitled when they're older. I think that is softness because you have to be able to have confidence, but also realize that like bad things are going to happen and you have to be able to manage that without having just falling down and saying like, yes, I'm terrible. Does that make sense? No, I'm not doing a good job today.
We'll drink a little bit of water. We're still on pace here because everyone, all the comments always say Mel says very smart
Oh.
things. So you must be on track. Let me throw people off and then you can bring it back. I want to talk about one more perception that leads to this overall saying, and then let's get to some actual solutions. So another perception is things were different when we were younger, and now kids are saying certain things and we're comparing it to our time frame of our youth when we were that age. And that's not necessarily fair. Often saying things like back in my day or when I was younger, this, that, and the other thing. And I'll give you an example that, or generations like this. When I worked, I was getting paid $5.15 in a sheet metal factory with no air conditioning in the heat of the summer. It was a summer job between school where we would take a hammer and sheets of metal and bang them into squares for ductwork and load them onto trucks. I got paid $5.15. And then it does fire me up when I see people like, I'm not working for anything below $17, $20, $25, but they have no skills. I need to be paid a livable wage to be able to hand you your food or pour your coffee. No, this is a starter job, and it annoys me that you don't understand that, and that livable wage would be leading or managing the shift of people who are doing temporary work. It's the lower level jobs. And it bothers me that gets celebrated so much in the news. And it's not necessarily true. Not everyone believes it, but I still have my own, like back in my day, I had a piece of metal go through my hand and out the other side for $5.15 an hour. And then you jump online and people are like, you should never, you're being exploited, blah, blah, blah. No, it was a fair exchange. I decided to go to work for the amount of money they said they'd pay me. I did the job. I got the money. And then I progressively worked up so that I can earn a more livable wage. And it goes back to my first point. That's not what gets celebrated in the news. What gets celebrated is people protesting not being paid a lot of money for a very low level job. That's not across the board true. But my perception is it is, and then I have to work through that in my head. Like, all right, maybe it's not. I do see people doing a great job. I had a great person at Shields that was just like so happy. Was doing work in the cafe, and she was doing a great job. And I like to acknowledge and celebrate people like that who are willing to do the work. I had a guy stop by the house to try to sell me Wi-Fi internet, and it was a younger guy working his way up. Didn't get paid a lot in a sales job, and it's a tough job going around knocking on doors on the side of a mountain to try to sell someone internet. Now I already have the internet of that company, so we just chatted a little bit, but it was almost like, wow, I can't believe this person's out here working, because all these stories I hear is nobody works these days. And so to see it and celebrate it, I'm trying to work through my own perceptions and realize maybe they're not as soft. Maybe it's just what's being sold, what's being told to me on the internet, what's being sold in the media. And there are exceptions to the rule. And whenever I hear percentages now, it sends off my tingly spider sense. People say, oh, doing this thing, I'll use a fitness example to take it off of people. If you do this exercise, you'll get 100% improvement over if you did this other exercise. What could be possible is that the first improvement was 0.5%, and now it's 1%. It's 100% improvement, but it's such a small amount, it didn't really matter. They just use statistics to confuse and trick and to overstate something. And so it's just good to filter that our perceptions of our youth, things are different these days. And as much as they're different, they're still the same in terms of characters and skill sets, character traits and skill sets that you need. While inflation certainly changed the amount of money and the perception of work has changed slightly due to a lot in the media. So balancing all that out can help you filter through this resiliency and not just say, back in my day, I believe this. And they'll shrug and say, well, it's not your day. And now you've created some push and pull between your kids because you're not understanding where they're coming from.
You think, though, that the perception now is not that you have to work your way up, that you just deserve? I think that's what I was trying to go for. I don't know what it is, because what we do here is like most people just feel entitled now and just want or deserve that $17 an hour to start. When I was working at like the dietary section of this one assisted living home when I was in high school, I was just like happy to be working and making some money, and like I didn't even think to myself I deserve more than this. I mean, at the time, of course, I wasn't paying for a mortgage or like things like that.
Right. Entry level job, or
Right, but
even below entry level, seasonal job.
right, but I recognize it as a stepping stone. Like I have work experience now, and then eventually I will work my way up. Not necessarily in that job, but just in life, you're going to look for something that requires a higher skill. So do you think that people just aren't focusing on teaching their kids that there are steps, like you have to start down here and work your way up?
Yes. And I think you're going to lead us well into our tactical discussion. What do we do about all this? I think that people are too focused on the outcome and not the process right now. The outcome is what you get. The process is what you learn or do along the way. So they focus on the outcome, which is the paycheck. And then they focus on the employer side and not the tremendous amount of taxes that come out of a paycheck. But anyways, they focus on the outcome, which is the paycheck. They focus on the grade, not the learning process. They focus on if the team won the championship, not all of the effort that went into the practice and the journey. And so being outcome based is a very fixed mindset. And instead, you need to celebrate the growth that happens in the process of doing the thing. Showing up on time, building relationships. I knew it. Back to the job example. If I were to show up and kick butt at work, it wasn't even about the outcome of the 515. It was that I would build relationships, and that employer could give me a bigger job going forward. They could be a reference. They could call their network and vouch for me as I work up through the process. And that happened a lot. It wasn't even about the paycheck. It was about the effort that was put in to show that I was worthy of those higher opportunities.
It's because you mentioned grades, and then I thought about school and how I volunteer at the school. I'm on different committees. And I think a lot of people are focused on the outcome. Like you said, they want their kid to have X education, or they want the school to change in this way. But then I don't want to make sweeping statements. Very few people show up to these kind of committees and opportunities.
Yes, because you do. And that's why
I do. So I know that there's maybe one or two parents that come, maybe three at best, out of hundreds. So I think people are focused on the outcome. They want a certain thing to happen, but then they don't make the time. And I understand that people work during the day, but I'm sure there's more than three parents that could make some of these meetings. And they're not a part of the solution. So I take the time. I had another meeting last week in the evening, which is unusual, and we had to rearrange our schedule to make that work because we see that's important. And at the end of the day, I want to show the kids, if you want to be a part of the change, so to speak, if you want your voice to be heard, you need to show up and do things and have skills and make intelligent statements. You can't show up and just complain. You have to be able to intelligently explain what your circumstance is. And I'm very open about my situation in these meetings. And actually the assistant superintendent emailed me and said, really appreciate your input. If you have any other suggestions on this particular meeting was about reach families and community members to be able to teach skills at the schools. It's because I've taken the time. I don't feel entitled like, well, they just should reach out to me. No, because I've put the effort forth, and I've taken the time and rearranged my schedule to be able to be part of the process.
This is putting the silver lining on this whole situation. With people generally, big sweeping statement, getting weaker, complaining a ton more, not participating in committees. They see attendance drop at the parent meetings. And it's not even this generation. It started earlier in our generation, voter apathy and less people, percentage of people vote, care, show up for um, things like that. And so the silver lining is this: when those people are opting out of participating and you opt in, you are much more influential. And I tell our kids, like, hey, there's, oh, these kids believe it. Okay, that's fine. Let's say all the other kids are soft, like you're trying to paint the picture. That means the bar is plenty low enough for you to be very successful. If you decide to develop the characters and skill sets, you'll stand out immediately. If you're one of the 3 parents that show up to a district meeting, you have the influence over those meetings in a much higher percentage than if they sent out a survey to everyone and everyone gets to just throw in their thoughts without actual participation. And so when you develop resiliency and develop stronger, you develop your own ability to participate, you're going to have a much higher influence and a higher chance of success today than ever before because other people are opting out. There's too many things to do at home. Home is too comfortable. Netflix is at home. Sitting down at home, the food delivery is at home. They don't want to go out and do these things and in the participation rates that when you do, you make a much bigger difference for you and your family because you can influence things in your direction.
Yeah, exactly. But you have to be willing to accept that the sacrifice that goes along with that. There's always going to be opportunity costs. I wasn't home that evening last week and things were a little off, but because I think it's so important to go out and be a part, have my voice heard. And I think sometimes parents will then come to me and say, I'm glad you're there. So like they can hear us because I know not everybody can go, but I just wish there was more emphasis on being part of the process. That's really my point.
Let's bring it down before we're done with the episodes. We've talked a lot of very higher level things about propaganda since the early 1900s. I know I got a little rant about that, but I just want to identify that it does exist and you need to filter it and you need to participate and the opportunity is greater. So there's hope. But what are some of the actual tactical things that we can do to help our family and children be more resilient? And one of it, as we've already talked about, I want to go through a few. One of it is to start celebrating the process. That's what's called the growth mindset. You can read Carol Dweck's book or look up at some Carol Dweck books on the summaries on YouTube just to get a good picture of it between the growth and the fixed mindset. But celebrating the character traits and skills that go into producing an outcome versus celebrating the outcome. It's not, hey, you're a great student. And now the child is associating themselves with being a great student. If they get a bad grade, they feel terrible about it because they're no longer great students right in their face. Or if you celebrate, wow, you really put in the time to study for this test. Wow, you really you're very persistent on this hard problem and you worked through it. You're not celebrating that they got the right answer. You're celebrating the persistence or the work or the effort or the character trait that went into it. And using verbiage like that does produce better outcomes. And you can read about it if you want. Additional Carol Dweck's book's been out for a couple of decades now, but she has some very compelling arguments that say celebrate the effort that goes in and not the outcome.
Well, a good example is Henry recently had a tiny house project at school where he had to design a tiny home on this computer program. And he'd never realized how much he would enjoy that. But he actually ended up asking the teacher if he could work on it at home, and he would bring the computer home and work on it. He spent hours on it and he got like an incredible grade because of his effort. But again, like when the grade came home, usually he doesn't like to bring anything home. Even if he does well, he just doesn't, I don't know, that's just part of his personality. But this particular project, he had put so much creativity and so much time and effort into it, and he really cared about it, that when he brought home his grade, I was like, that's well deserved because of how hard you worked. And I'm choosing those words on purpose, just like you're saying. So it's really important. And he brought it up again and again. I said, you worked so hard on that. He's actually doing another one now just because he wants to, not because he even has to get a grade, because he tapped into some new skills and new creativity that he's excited about. But again, I made sure to focus on the effort he put into it, not the outcome.
Next tactic, I would advise you to try this out. Draw a big line on a sheet of paper. On one side of the line, baby, and the other side, write independent adult. And then on that line, you write different stages of things that they go from a baby where they're fully dependent on you for food and everything else, all the way to the other end of independent adult where they're doing all those things, providing their food, providing their shelter for themselves. What needs to happen in between, and you can put those dashes, view it like a timeline, of things that you want to accomplish along the way. If you don't put them down, if you don't put ideas down, oh, teach them how to cook a meal. Maybe I do that in fifth grade. I don't care when you do it, fifth grade, sixth grade, seventh grade, fourth grade, whenever it serves you, but you put something down so that you hold yourself to it so that they're learning skills and independence along the way. And then you celebrate when they accomplish those goals. So they become less reliant on you and more reliant on their own skills. That helps them develop confidence and resiliency like nothing else will. What destroys resiliency if you have a 20-year-old that is fully reliant still on you like they are a baby. You need to provide their food. You need to provide their shelter. You need to do their laundry. You need to do all their stuff, and they're 20. That timeline is way off, and you're setting them up for incredible mental health issues because they're not going to have confidence. You're going to set them up for lack of success because compared to their peers, now they're significantly behind. Because along the way, you didn't do the work to nudge them forward. It's very easy to do it along the way. It's very hard to do it all at once when you realize, wow, things are crazy off track. Not impossible, but much harder that way. So I just do some brainstorming. Think of some things that they can do that are age appropriate, that'll help teach them independence, which will help build confidence and resiliency.
And this really, again, you have to celebrate when they have successes in those areas. And I have a couple examples. Usually on the weekend, Henry will have a buddy over, and he was here yesterday because we're recording this on a Monday, but he was here yesterday and they spent maybe 6 hours. And honestly, I didn't have to do anything for them. They made each other food. He actually taught them how to do our yogurt. And then while they were making their yogurt, they made it for Everett as well. And he was involved in that process. So
That's a good point. I don't want to cut it off too much because you're on a good flow, is that to show that they really learned and mastered something, have them teach it to someone else.
Yeah.
And that also builds a tremendous amount of confidence. And now that they are the teacher, because they view teachers in a high light, especially at that age.
Right. And it just also, they have this wonderful independence that they're feeling. Even that kid that comes over, he has his own water bottle he uses every time. He knows where the bowls are. Like, they don't have to ask me for everything. They just do it. So then later that evening, when I was driving him home, I praised them both. I said, I'm really proud of you guys. You basically took care of yourselves all day, made your food. They were doing drawing. They were 3D printing. They went outside. They found a lot of things to do with their time that was productive. And it didn't depend on me. And this was a big focus for us maybe a year ago, where we're like, we're not in charge of all your entertainment. You got to think of things to do. So that was a great example. Another is our oldest started doing spring football. And he asked me if he could stay after with a friend because there's an hour and a half between school and practice, and if they could just stay out after. Now, my son does not have a phone, but he has proven that he can be responsible and independent, and I didn't worry about letting him just go hang out because he knows what to do. He knows where, actually his friend probably has a phone, so if he needed something, he could reach us, but I understand and didn't hesitate to let him do that and almost get his feet wet. Let's see how this goes. And also, he goes up to an office to work on 3D printers, and he maintains them and has other responsibilities in this company.
It's a very cool opportunity. I'm very thankful for that family that's helped him.
Very much. It's been huge for him. But we drop him off. It's about 20 minutes away. We drop him off. He's there for 5-6 hours on a Saturday. And he's basically by himself. Sometimes other people are there. But he is getting things done. He's adding value to this company. He's gaining resilience and independence by being there by himself. He makes his lunch in the morning before he goes. So we've taught him the skills, and then now he's still becoming more independent, but we're celebrating it. I think that's pretty awesome, and that's going to help him feel strong and not so dependent, and he knows he can handle it.
Another piece of this for the tactic side is if you visit strongfamilyproject.com and download the 7 steps of the path, which we talk about all the time, the more you teach them these routines, the more confident and resilient they'll become. On Saturday, Mel and I went down to the track, a little track practice on Saturday. I go run sprints till they make me sad and emotional, which is not a lot of sprints. Happens pretty quick.
I speed walk.
Mel speed walks, listens to podcasts, does some learning. And we come back because we left before the kids got up. We want to go early in the morning, and then we get back. Their morning routine's done. They've done their morning exercise. Their contributions are done where they did their chores. They did the ice maker. They, just like everyone's refrigerator or ice machine broke. We tried to get it fixed. They said, we can't fix this. Yeah, whatever. So you guys got to do the ice cubes every day. They do unload the dishwasher. They prepare their morning shakes. And so everything was done by the time we got home. It wasn't that we had to be there. They were dependent on us for their own accountability to do their process. And so we're able to hand things off along the way, just like I mentioned that timeline, hand things off along the way. And they need to be accountable to the level that it gets done when you're not there to tell them to do it.
And this also from the parent side. Some parents are very reluctant to hand over the reins. And I was like that. And I've learned so much from having Logan 14 years ago through Everett, who's 6 now, where I can't, sometimes I might be able to do it better or do it quicker, but I have to be willing to hand over the reins because they need to learn that skill. So even if they're baking something and it makes a bit of a mess, I focus now more on the fact that they want to make something. They want to be more independent and not make it about the mess, or that's really silly now when I look back. So the fact that we came home, that's a huge win for us. And we, again, praised them for getting all their stuff done that morning. And it might sound to someone listening, oh, must be nice. This is really 10 years of us doing this
It's
slowly.
constant, gentle
Yes,
pressure. It's hard to
exactly.
do all at once, but it's worth starting and nudging.
And back when Henry and Logan were little, like 3 and 5, we had a chore chart. They had these little magnets they would slide over when they finished making their bed or whatever little thing they were doing. So this is like a progression over time. And it's never too late, of course, to start. But that progression is important. And even in parenting, honestly, you don't usually see the results of the fruits of your labor overnight. It usually is when you've put the effort in over time. So there's no reason to not start right now. And you mentioned the 7 steps and the different routines, but really the foundation of all of that is the values. And to bring it full circle, when you earlier mentioned if you hear things through media, how you're going to filter that and how you're going to contrast it at home, an amazing way to contrast it at home is having those values and living by them and sharing examples of them constantly, because that's how the kids will start to critically think. I noticed that. Henry heard something at school the other day that he didn't quite agree with, and he came home and told me, and I could tell he struggled with it because he was contrasting what he was hearing from other kids with what we teach him at home. And again, that's a win because I don't want him to just accept whatever he hears. I want him to think through it. And the way we teach them to think through it is by giving them the filter of our core values.
I have 2 more. I'm going to say the best for last, the most challenging for last, I should say, not the best for last. A lot of these other ones are great because they're easy to do, so that might be the best. So start wherever you're at. Next one, I think they should be in a sort of sport or activity. You say, well, my kid's not sporty. Like, that's fine. They don't have to be sporty. One of ours was not sporty for a long time. We signed him up for swimming. And because it's a skill we want them to learn, they show up to practice. They get coached by someone else. There's some competitive nature. There's a different evaluation system than at school, so they understand there's a different way of doing things and being rewarded and all that. Tons of value in it. Wins or losses don't matter, especially at kids' age. Who cares? He was terrible at swimming. Like, they would do just down, and sometimes he wouldn't even get off the block. The other kids are like halfway. They're like, all right, get in. We gotta get in the water. And then, all right, he'll jump in and just doggy paddle to the other side. He didn't really care, but he was learning and progressing. He just started at a lower level. And then one of our kids wanted to compete and win. And so it just is what it is. Doesn't matter. We did the same thing with track. They did that. They did football. They did soccer. They did town basketball. It was just teaching them to listen and be coachable by anyone else, just by someone else, to produce a different outcome. And it doesn't have to be sports. It could be extracurricular, art, band, whatever that leads to a competition where you create something as an individual or team to see what you do. It doesn't have to be niched down to those specific items, but since they're readily available, I think you should use those items.
And to be transparent, I was super nervous when we had wanted to sign our oldest up for a sport because he historically has not wanted to play. Like he wasn't very athletic. We signed him up for like Little League, and he's the one picking grass in the outfield. But I always wanted him to have the experience of being on a team, and then we let it go for a little while. And then last year, beginning of this school year, 8th grade, you had said to me, we need him, he's going to have to choose some kind of sport. Because by the time you get to high school, you're going to have a higher level skill to be able to play. So this might be his last opportunity to play something and be a part of a team in that way. And I was so nervous. And then, but you were like, we're going to give him these options. He's going to choose. And it's really been amazing. And last year, it wasn't like a great season necessarily. The team didn't like do fantastically, but like you said, it's not really about that. He was part of a team. He's becoming more physically fit. And I was amazed at the effort he was putting forth on this team. He no longer is the kid that'll sit on the side and just pick the grass. He's putting so much more effort into it. And now he decided to also sign up for spring sports. And he's funny. I'm going to do spring football because I need something more to do. He's aching to do something with other kids and in a team effort in that way. It's been really positive.
There's a good point in there, and that's allow your kids to change and grow. Don't pigeonhole them as a 6-year-old or a 5-year-old or a 4-year-old or a 12-year-old. It doesn't matter. They still have an opportunity to change and grow. And so if you say, when you were younger, this and that, so now maybe you don't want to do this. Like, they're different. They change so fast. It's amazing. So if you pigeonhole them, oh, you're unathletic, that is what they're always going to lean towards if you keep telling them that story. But let them rewrite their story. They're kids. Man, let them explore things. I get fired up because I'm not going down that path. But when you pigeonhole kids as a certain thing when they're younger, it completely limits their ability to grow, adapt, and become successful and independent adults because they still are going to be that thing you told them they were going to be from 4 until 18.
And that influence can come from outside of the home too, because I have an example. Logan was doing robotics last year, and I was talking to one of his teachers, and she was saying, "Oh, he's got to go. He's got to keep with this. Do the robotics every year. I'm sure he's gonna be an engineer and this and that." I'm thinking to myself, he still has 5 years before he graduates. I don't want him to just do one thing for this whole time. But she had it like in her mind that he was just like her son, and that he was going to follow this path. And I think it was probably shocking to her that he ended up doing football. You don't have to, I think there are these stereotypes that people try to squeeze their kid into, or even teachers might try to squeeze them into that path. And that wasn't necessarily what was right for him. So I love that you said that, not to pigeonhole them. Try something else, try something new. And this worked out better than we expected it to. And I love that he has discovered a new side of himself.
Goes back to my point on propaganda. Some of it can benefit. Like if they had someone that they looked up to and respected, like, oh, I did this thing. Maybe you should do this thing. And like, maybe that's the right choice. Like, maybe that's good. People assumed, like, oh, your kids will play football because you played college football. Never pushed him towards it. He wants to do robotics. We did robotics. It wasn't a huge alignment with our core values and how things were ran. And basically, you'd go to practice, eat tons of junk food, and not be held accountable for any results. And so it wasn't like a great fit for him and what we were looking for. And we said, hey, you can pick anything. We will pay for you to go to, you want to do jujitsu, we'll pay for the classes outside of school. You can pick any school sport that you want. And he picked football because some of his buddies were saying, all right, let's do that. And that's how it played out. The other ones picked, a middle child picked soccer and basketball, not a sport that I played and a sport that I did play. But I'm not pigeonholing. I'm like, oh, I did this thing. You should do this thing. Let them grow. Let them explore. My last one, Mel, and then if you have one, you may jump in, on resiliency is something you mentioned about Logan not having. That's a cell phone. This one is a challenging topic. When is it appropriate to give a child a cell phone? I think it depends a lot on all the work that you've done with them preceding that cell phone. So I'm not like anti-cell phone. Oh, no one should have, like, kids shouldn't have them. If they understand your family values and there's a specific reason for them having it, like they're starting to do way more independent things and you just find it necessary and you put limits on it where it can't download all these social media apps, like maybe that's appropriate for your family. Looked at some research before we got on this podcast because I knew this would come up. 1% of parents out of 100,000 polled, so 1,000, said it was appropriate to start giving them a cell phone in kindergarten. And then you have Mel's eyes getting big. And then there was, oh man, I'm going to forget some of the numbers. The majority said 5th grade or younger. So that included 5th grade, 3rd grade, kindergarten, I think were the categories. And then not until high school was like 48%. So just a small minority wanted to wait to high school, but 100% of them had agreed that they should have cell phones by the end of high school. And we don't have a date in mind. But what I'm saying up front is very important. All those other pieces of your family path need to be in place before you hand them this thing that's going to fight for their intention and make them incredibly dependent on for their entertainment and dependent on you for solving their problems. The biggest reason why I hear parents get a cell phone is I want them to be able to contact me whenever they need. Is that a good thing? I don't know. I want to pose that question because everyone says it like it's assumed to be a good thing. I need them to be able to contact me. Why don't they figure out some of this stuff by themselves? Do they have the skill set to solve the problem? Go to the office, use a phone, know where the local police station is if you need an emergency. Look to a trusted adult that you already know and trust and have vetted. They go to the neighbor's house. Have you identified emergency action plans? Like all those skills then can get amplified if they have a phone, or they can become dependent on just the phone and never have any of those skills. Must be a miracle that we all got where we needed to go in the 90s and even early 2000s because we weren't dependent on a phone. Very rarely use a payphone. Did occasionally have a quarter or whatever, but very rarely use a payphone. We had to figure it out, and I think we became more skilled. And here's the nuance, and I want to emphasize this: became less dependent on our parents to solve all of our problems. If we went to tennis practice, so Town of Union tennis, because we got signed up for all town sports because it was affordable and there's a lot of different sports you can try and play. And it rained halfway through practice. And so we have an hour left. Parents aren't going to come for an hour. The walk home is 45 minutes. What do? Do we sit there for an hour? Do we walk home? We got to solve this problem ourselves. Myself and my older brother were there. We decided to walk home. We'll get home. Then we'll figure it out. The tennis coach offered to give us a ride. I said no because I've been taught to never get into a car with someone that is a stranger. And they weren't really a stranger, the tennis coach. My brother chose the ride, got the ride, went home early, and I walked by myself the rest of the way because I had been taught, don't risk it. And so I took the stroll. Worked out for both of us. I got a good walk in. He did make it home. It's not like kids were getting snatched up all over the place, but teaching him those skill sets is important. And if you throw him a cell phone and say, here, this solves all your problems, all you need to do is press this button and I'll be there. Press this button and you'll be entertained. Press this button, you can find any information you need. Too early, they haven't developed any skills to be able to process at least the beginning stages of that themselves.
I mean, I'm in 100% agreement with what you're saying. And the more you're talking about it, the more I'm realizing how much having a phone gives you less skills because it doesn't force you to figure anything out. And in an example, if we leave Logan at school, Henry would ride the bus down to be able to watch a basketball game there was the girls' games were playing after the boys. So he would stay after and watch the girls' games. And I basically just said to him, how can you reach me if you need to? And he named there's going to be people with phones. There's a phone by the front office. I know where that is. And he had to think through how he would be able to reach me if needed. And same thing with Logan. When he stays after school, I just let him think through how he'd be able to reach me if there was a problem. And if he just had the phone, he wouldn't ever have to think about any of that. And that has occurred to me. Sometimes I think to myself, it'd be nice right now if they had a phone. The other day, he messaged me through some other app on his school tablet to be like, I'm going to stay after with my friend. And I was like already waiting at the school to pick him up. And I'm glad he had that ability to tell me that. But had he not, he would have just had to walk out and tell me in person, like big deal. So as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking to myself, when I drive anywhere, I bring my phone mostly because there's crazy drivers. And if I were to get in an accident, I want to be able to reach somebody. But one day I forgot it. And I thought to myself, it's okay because I have legs, I could walk. Or there's going to be someone nearby that has a phone. There's going to be other ways, but just being able to have that thought process, I think, is being thwarted with kids. They're not being asked to think outside the box. If something were to arise, geez, your battery could die. Then what? And I think a lot of people would not know what to do.
So this warrants probably a full episode. But I did want to mention it because I think it is a critical component. And like the celebrating the process and not the outcome, a lot of this comes down to the communication you put around that item. So if you just hand it to them and hope they figure it out, then it's inviting a lot of trouble and it's inviting low resiliency. If you hand it to them and explain the skills that go behind it and challenge them, okay, let's turn it off for a day. Can you turn off your phone as a parent for a day and see what happens? Like, how would you solve these problems? It's a good practice. And make sure you still have these skills and you communicate it as this is a tool that'll serve X, Y, and Z purpose specifically. And we don't use it really to play Candy Crush or whatever games that people play these days. The world around you is going to be more important. Interact with that. And then you can use this while you're on the crapper.
Five.
Exclusively. I'm just
That's
kidding.
a great way to finish. Well,
Really took a unsophisticated
yeah,
turn there at the end. So Mel, bring us home.
but see, we love humor. That makes life more fun. I want to reiterate something that we already said, but I think it needs to be really clear. So the kid, like you said earlier, when the kids are younger, they are dependent on us for everything. And over time, like you said, drawing that line and kind of writing out the different skills that need to be gained to be a successful, independent adult is super important. And I do think when a kid has a phone and they know they can always reach you, or they know you're tracking them, for example, because I think people do track where their kids are at all times, that takes away their ability to become independent. If you say to them, "What did you do at CVS that afternoon?" "I stopped in to get a piece of gum." If you know where they are at all times and they know you know where they are at all times, how will they ever depend on themselves? How will they ever not feel like how will they ever feel capable of surviving without you? And I think that is an important thing to think about. It's almost a tough truth where, of course, I want to know where my kid is, but I also want them to learn the skill of how to not depend on me when they're older. And I know as maybe it's stronger for mothers where like, I just want to be like there every moment and do everything with them and show them everything. But I also understand that that's not going to be helpful to them when they're an adult.
Some of the kids' most proud moments when they are glowing and share us a story of what they did is when they solve a problem by themselves. Especially Henry comes up, wow, we did this thing and I did this. And I was at the girls' game, then I went ran some hill sprints, and then I did this thing. Like he's so proud of what he's able to do by himself and not like us test. Did you do this thing? Like
Right. Is it okay if I this? Is it okay if I that?
Undermines their independence and their confidence.
Okay. Can I tell one more little story?
Yes.
So we were driving to school the other day, and Logan mentioned to me how he stayed after school with his friend that day and how he messaged me. And he said, when I messaged you, I was really more just telling you that I was going to do it, not that I was asking you if I could do it. And I said, but your question was, Mom, can I stay after school? And he's, oh, really? He didn't realize that he had worded it that way because in his mind, he already had decided. No, I had no reason to say no. And part of me thought, you should ask my permission. I'm your mom. Like, I get to tell you whether you can do this or not. But on the other hand, I loved that he had decided it for himself, that he didn't worry about staying after school for an hour and a half without supervision. And it's funny to me that he didn't realize the way he asked the question. But again, I'm seeing that he's asserting independence, and I'm always looking for opportunities. So he presented me with an opportunity to give him an opportunity to be more independent, and we took it, and it went well. I just thought it was funny because in his mind, he's already going to say, I'm doing this thing, like regardless.
He goes back to that point about creating your timeline. Like he's at the point of the timeline where he needs some more control over his life so he can become resilient. And of course, he'll get tons of guidance elsewhere because he's still in that area of time of life, but it's not to the point where we need to undermine his own personal authority over what he wants to do. Like, all right, you want to stay after school and hang out with a friend? Great. As long as you don't do anything that we don't say this, but after, hey, don't do anything that you shouldn't be doing. We almost don't even have to say it because, like, why would he? If he doesn't even come across do something that you shouldn't be doing, then obviously you can't do that anymore. It's almost it goes unsaid because.
But the stage of life is important. Or him going up to the office this weekend, he went 2 days. But before he went, I said, you have to make sure these 3 things are put together. You have to make sure your homework's all done. We go through all of his assignments, and he's I'll just take it to the office. I'm like, no, you have to get it done, because the previous weekend that didn't go so well. So we made sure that he had his responsibility.
For listening to another episode of the Strong Family Project podcast. We'll be back next week. Visit strongfamilyproject.com. Download the steps of the path that put all these conversations into a framework that you can adapt for your family. It's all free at strongfamilyproject.com.